So, welcome back to 3rd Age Reforged and to another battle replay and to another one of the battles that was inspired by a real-life historical event that's going to be viewed through the lens of 3rd Age Reforged. And on this occasion we have the Battle of Cape Economus, which is of course a naval battle, which, as you can see, obviously a little bit of jury rigging has to go on to allow sort of ship-to-ship combat, as it were, to happen in Medieval 2, because while you can have stuff like the black ships which have been made and are a part of the Caer Andros map, there are a few issues with regards to pathfinding and the like which would make using them a little bit more tricky than just doing it like this. So you can see that there are a few ships, some of which are already taking on a little bit of water, it must be said, and yeah, so there's several boats which are going to be utilised here for this battle, and it is going to be between Gondor and actually a mix of Umbar once again, who have been a very popular faction as of late with a lot of 3rd Age Reforged replays, but also Dol Amroth, who are actually on the side of Umbar today, which would suggest that perhaps akin to the Ar Adunayim script in Divide and Conquer, the Dol Amroth have already been subjugated and perhaps Gondor are next on the chopping block. So we shall see if this fight in the Bay of Belfalas goes the way of Gondor and they can perhaps get Dol Amroth back on side through force, or if Umbar and the Black Númenóreans' forward momentum will continue and perhaps Castamir's idea will reign supreme after all. But as you can see, there's also several boats which it's a bit all over the place really. Obviously, as you would imagine, several ships have sort of slammed into the side of this Gondorian naval column, and obviously some boats have also arrived from the front as well. But we'll go through Gondor first and foremost, working our way through the map. We'll go through the army compositions fairly quickly actually, because for the most part these compositions are going to be relatively similar, I would imagine. So ballistas on the back here, a bit of artillery to sort of represent the ship's weaponry, I would assume. Got some Fountain Guard back here, Marshal of the Guard, of course, who is Spirit of Thunder, so he is the maker of this map. Citadel Guard here also. This should be the kind of battle, honestly, where Gondor do quite well, because it's going to be involved in a lot of many varied but small choke points, which Gondor should be quite good at holding onto, even against the quality of Umbar. You would imagine that they should be okay as long as they play their cards right. Gondor definitely a little bit more defensively orientated than the two they're facing off against today, especially infantry-wise. Wardens of the White Tower here, Citadel Guard getting ready to go across there, and actually that is one of Alisand's units, so he's another Gondorian. Caer Andros Marksmen, Pelagia Marines, some Gondor infantry with the first level of armour upgrade, another one of them there, some Citadel Guardsmen as well, some Marksmen of Caer Andros, another ballista, this is King Amar, so the third Gondorian player. Citadel Guard waiting in the wings as well, Gondor Archers and Pelagia Marines are here on each side of the ship as well, more infantry. We've got some more Gondor Spearmen over here, again, just the first level of armour upgrade on a lot of these troops, it must be said, which is quite interesting. The Veterans of Osgiliath, however, have got their armour upgrade as well, which makes them a very tough unit to break down indeed, whether at range or in melee. Some more infantry mixed in with them as well. A bit of a strong point over here as well. This ship looks like it's been crippled a little bit though, must be said. Gondor Archers, Gondor Spearmen, Pelagia Marines once again. Some Gondor Spearmen on the front, so you can see all of the armies are spread out a little bit, so one player isn't going to be sat at the back doing nothing for the entire game, which is always nice. Getting everyone involved right from the start, infantry, marines, archers, lots of the standard stuff. And there is also another Gondorian ship here, also trying a counter-flank onto the opponent's navy. Gondor, infantry, spears, and Pelagia Marines once again. So a lot of the basic stuff for Gondor, a lot of infantry, spears, archers, and Pelagia Marines. And then there are a few of their more elite units as well, but no shock infantry, interestingly enough. So they're not going to have a lot of killing power on the front line without the Ravenhelms or the Axemen of Lasarnak. But we shall see how they do there. They should be good at holding the line, however, with a lot of their units. Citadel Guard have also got a bit of punch to them as well. Meanwhile, Umbar, played by Eclipse 2500 of the Dark Cloud, some Balagear footmen and some Corsair infantry, ready to rush forward with some Dol Amroth forces from Mr. Sneakman ready to back him up. Some Ethalond men-at-arms, just the standard version of them. Some Belfalas Marines as well. Tirathean Marksmen are a good quality archer as well, albeit skirmishing with Gondor is certainly a long and drawn out affair at the best of times. Balagear footmen are in here as well, again armoured up. We have some Ethalond men-at-arms, some Belfalas Marines once again, and some upgraded Doranonal archers, so both sides are definitely going to have the ability to skirmish with one another without too much difficulty. In the distance, some Balagear footmen, Ethalond men-at-arms, archers, Corsair infantry as well, so not a huge amount of quality front and centre for Umbar or Dol Amroth, but they have a lot of units which will take quite a while to die, whether at range or in melee. Lots of spears, lots of armour upgrades on their stuff as well. Ballista for Dol Amroth. A little bit further back here we have yet more Belagaya footmen, more Thalond men-at-arms and Tarnostian spears, which isn't going to change the quality stakes all that much. Another ballista, but the dismounted knights of the Silver Swan are good as well. Their overall stats maybe aren't as impressive as other multiple HP line infantry units, but they do inspire nearby units, and if you have to pay for your army, they're also a little bit cheaper than units that are often multiple HP as well. So obviously the stats do reflect that. They're not as strong as a lot of the other bodyguard units, and I would hesitate to call them a bodyguard, to be honest. That multiple HP is the only thing that makes them that way. But they're still a good supporting tool. More Thalond men-at-arms, more Belagaya footmen, some more serious Umbar infantry back here as well in the Alcarondas Legion, which in terms of pure line infantry is the best that any of these three factions can do, really. Big fan of the Alcarondas. Naru Naaru Sentinels and Adonai Shield Guard, some Naru Naaru Royal Guard, and another ballista back here as well from Umbar. And then a little bit further forward, I'm not sure what those spikes are further out to sea. Perhaps some sort of artificial harbour defence. Corsair Infantry, some Thalond men-at-arms as well, and that's pretty much it. So again, a lot of basic units for both sides actually. There's no Haven Guard. There are some Black Swans over here though, so again, nice units, but not a lot of shock infantry, which may have something to do with the fact that this is a battle which, well, the real life battle equivalent of this was in sort of the late antiquity, you could call it, depending on your point of view, or sort of the mid antiquity. Again, exact dates, but again, not a lot of shock infantry going around at that time. A lot of shielded units, a lot of javelins and the like. So it will be quite interesting to see how this battle goes about. But without further ado, let's begin. Like I said, I think Gondor will be happier with the fact that this battle is certainly going to be fought in narrower engagements. Interesting to see well, from what we can see, no Corsair crossbowmen, but they could reveal themselves, which would be a very useful tool for Umbar to have. They may very well have some Corsair blackguards as well, which as far as a javelin unit goes, would be the strongest on the field, which, considering the close quarters here, considering the fact that it's actually going to be quite difficult, to be honest with you, to avoid any sort of range fire, depending on when the enemy get into position. Could be quite interesting here. You can see that Eclipse is already moving forward, getting into position with his Belagaya footmen. They're not going to struggle at holding the line, the Belagaya footmen, but against a lot of the armour upgraded Gondorians, even if it is only the first level, the Belagaya footmen will struggle to do damage. But the opposite is also true for the Gondor spearmen. I think maybe they're a little bit better at dealing damage than the Belagaya, so they might have a little bit of an edge there, and these little advantages may very well add up over the course of the battle. Are we going to see an engagement immediately? I'm not sure whether I should be making a cut here, to be honest with you. I think I will, actually, because it's quite obvious that units are sort of shifting around. I'll make a quick cut here, and hopefully the battle won't take... hopefully this manoeuvring won't take too long. Indeed, it didn't take too long, and you can see the Gondor infantry are moving forward, slamming into the front line of the Belagaya footman. Belagaya. I think it's Belagaya? Anyway, the Gondor infantry are fighting. The Gondor infantry should have the upper hand in this battle, to be honest with you, because they are swordsmen after all. They will be better in close quarters like this, and they are not subject to the spear malice. The Gondor archers and veterans of Osgiliath shooting into the front line over here, but the Belfalas Marines going to return fire with a good salvo there, which, hitting the veterans of Osgiliath with those javelins is definitely a worthwhile target to go after, because they're very good at range, but also they have value later on in melee, so killing them will be of benefit throughout the game, you would think. There may be a little bit of a camera thing as well, like juddering as we go over the water, but that's unavoidable in a map like this, unless I follow the bridges exactly, but that is easier said than done as well. These Gondorians on this ship over here are a little bit surrounded, actually, as you can see the main advance from the Corsairs and the men of Dol Amroth heading down here, as the Thalond men-at-arms move in. The Belagaya footmen also coming forward, although they've taken a lot of damage. Again, you can see the Belagaya Marines in behind, clearly doing a good amount of damage there. Gondor infantry and spears. I mean, this force here from the Gondorians is a little bit isolated. You would imagine they will go down eventually, but they can go down swinging, and especially with the support of the archers on the boat just to their, well, if we're looking at this, the boat to their port, they are going to be able to do a decent amount of damage with their archers. But the opposite is also true. Umbar shooting point blank, and you can see the Gondor spearmen actually broken Not enough morale support over here, just basic units, remember, so breaking could be a very real problem. Which I actually quite like. I like the fact that more of the basic units are being used here. Corsair infantry firing in, doing a lot of damage actually to the Pelagia Marines. Pelagia Marines, of course, are shielded, but they are one of the Gondorian units which is lighter on armour. Not as light as the Rangers, of course, but perhaps the only other unit in Gondor's roster which the armour values are maybe not all that impressive. A lot of Gondor's roster, after all, most certainly is very heavy on the armour. The Ballista already firing. Obviously, as much as Gondor are a little bit isolated over here, so too are the forces of Umbar and Dol Amroth over here, as an overwhelming force, really, of Gondorian footmen moving forward to smash the Belagaea out of the way. And all of the archer support as well as a problem. The Ballista coming in, doing damage to the men-at-arms. I mean, they are most certainly completely isolated over here. It was a brave but foolhardy captain that made this decision to slam into the side here. They had a few more boats, they could have broken through the entire formation perhaps, but in the end got too far ahead of himself, and now the plate-clad Gondorians, plate and mail-clad Gondorians I should say, making progress there. Meanwhile, over here Dol Amroth and Umbar just biding their time, waiting before they move over here. They're trying to skirmish first and foremost, or perhaps make it so the Gondorians over here on Alisand's wing use up more of their ammunition before a general advance is ordered. If the Marines come forward, like, absorbing javelin fire is more difficult than absorbing arrow fire, because if they hit they're going to do damage. Meanwhile, classic medieval 2 pathfinding, as all of these units seem insistent on trying to walk through the rock instead of around it. But yeah, the Gondorians over here are also being utterly overwhelmed. Very similar story over here to what's happening further north on the battlefield as we see it, with the Dol Amroth and Umbar flank against the Gondorians. It's an interesting contrast to see the red, black and yellow of Umbar with the silver and blue of Dol Amroth as they move forward into the black and silver of Gondor. Again, the Belagaea, a useful unit to have on the front line just to absorb punishment. The Belagaea in general tend to be very, very good at that, especially with the armour upgrade, of course. Like, their stats are not all that impressive, certainly. I think they only have a melee attack of 3, actually, which when subject to the Spear Malice is obviously very low, especially against armoured targets, such as the Gondorians, but as just a holding unit, as the meat and potatoes of your front line, as it were, you should be okay. Interesting, the Corsair infantry will probably actually perform better in terms of dealing damage in melee, but they certainly aren't capable of absorbing the same levels of damage. But then they also have that bow, which makes them gives them a bit of extra utility. So there is a case for saying that the Corsairs could maybe be even more useful throughout the course of this battle. You can see some of the Gondorians have fallen, some of the Gondor archers, but again, it's very much like two forces trying to just erode one another down when it comes to a skirmish fight between Gondor and Umbar, because both of them are really very comfortable at trading blows with the enemy over a long period of time at range, and there aren't rangers on the field today, so neither of them are going to be able to rely on them to be the choke point buster that they normally are, which is interesting. I think it's refreshing to not see rangers, to be honest. You can see over here that, to be fair, you know, this little flanking force, it's still trying its best. There's still the odd javelin coming in. They're still fighting. They will, of course, lose. But perhaps it's not too surprising. Again, a lot of these units fighting are Gondor spears. They are also subject to the Spear Malice. They kill infantry relatively slowly in the grand scheme of things, but they're also very good at keeping themselves alive, it must be said. Especially in this situation where they're not having to deal with armour piercing from stuff like the Balakith Axgar. Meanwhile, that boat over there has been completely taken now by Umbar and Dol Amroth as they continue their forward advance, and Eclipse wasting no time moving on to King Amar's next boat. He is going to attempt to take that as the Belagaea footmen do get into position. Ethelon men-at-arms also moving forward in support, so nice combination of swords and spears here. But more Gondorians are also on the way, more Gondor infantry with the armour upgrade as well. They're probably going to be superior to the Ethelond men-at-arms, or the Ethalond men-at-arms, I should say. But it is interesting, the general advance is now in full swing as Umbar and Dol Amroth continue to try and move forwards. Of course, with the flanking forces already mostly destroyed, to be honest with you, it will turn into a battle of 2 pathways to the end, you have to say, with Alisand on one side, King Amar picking up the slack on the other, and then Marshal of the Gar presumably coming in to reinforce as and when he is needed. shall have to wait and see on that one. Of course, there could be a sort of cascading effect here. And I think that there isn't any minor or major victory conditions on this one. It literally is just whoever wins the battle gets the major victory, I suppose. Ballista bolts coming in from further afield, shooting into the side of this Gondorian. But one rule is that each boat, you can't just send forward units constantly to hold one choke point. Like, as soon as one boat starts getting attacked, you can no longer send more units in indefinitely to hold on to that area. At least for the most part. Apparently that was a rule that was broken a couple of times in this battle, but not to the extent where we're just going to see 2 choke points for the next 30,000 frames, which I'm certainly glad about. Further back here though, gives a bit of fluidity to the battle and a bit of movement. Corsair infantry actually fighting well on the front line here. With their armour upgrade, they're actually doing pretty decently. The makeshift light infantry that they are, obviously they don't have a huge amount of ammunition. I mean, those javelins are going to make sure that they fall away pretty quickly. But you can see here that it is just a reminder that the Corsair infantry are a dual-purpose unit. They're not just a lower-end archer unit that you can use in a skirmish fight as Umbar. They do double as a half-decent line infantry unit. And they can be used as such. And it does give an interesting possible alternative to using the Belagaya footman, because of course Umbar, if you want to have line infantry, you either go normally for the Belagaya footman, which is obviously a lower tier, much lower damage option, or the Alcarondas Legion, which is much more expensive, but of course it is also extremely strong. Oof, more ballista bolts coming in. Alisan's ballista crisscrossing the ballista fire really, as King Ammar, I think it was, firing into the side of this Umbar force as well. And it is a good target as well, because Eclipse has sent forward his Alcarondas Legion, which is a significant boost in power to this assault. Gondor can of course bog them down for a pretty long period of time. There's still a lot of infantry on the front line. There's javelins in support, but Umbar definitely doing their thing here, flexing their muscles. When it comes to being aggressive with infantry, Umbar definitely have the beating of Gondor, I would say, but when Gondor are being defensive, that is where they have the edge with all of their polearm focus, albeit they are without the Fountain Guard today. They're without Athelian Rangers. They're without the Nimlothian Honour Guard as well, by the looks of things. The only of the normal suspects that are here, really, or the usual suspects, I should say, are the Citadel Guard, which of course is still significant. The armour piercing will still be incredibly useful. This is some good shots for the ballista. They're not doing absolutely earth-shattering amounts of damage, but they are chipping away, and they are doing damage to that Dol Amroth morale, which is actually a little bit more fragile than it may first appear. Balance of forces is evenly matched as the Thalond men-at-arms move in. Again, more ballista fire crisscrossing from the Gondorians, trying to do the damage here while they can. But on the front lines, it must be said, the Gondorians are slowly being forced back. And a lot of that can be down to the supports here. They're just constantly streaming in infantry, but also arrows. But over here as well, a unit like the Belfast Marines throwing their javelins in, getting some good hits. Again, javelins, they can scarcely miss because of the amount of Gondorians that are over here, so they're going to hit, they're going to get some kills. And more Gondorians are streaming forward here as Alisan comes forward. I thought this was what was against the rules, which is perhaps where the rule breaking came in. It can be very tempting, you can get quite comfortable holding a single choke point, but it definitely doesn't make for the most cinematic experience, so hopefully he ceases and desists sooner rather than later. You can also see that Umbar and Dol Amroth also using their ballistas to good effect, shooting at point blank from over here actually, moving their siege weaponry over to this boat and shooting into the sides, which this Gondorian front line is struggling a little bit actually. Some Tarnostian spearmen are broken, probably as a result of perhaps even friendly fire, but there's a lot of routing units on the front line actually. Friendly fire and of course the ballista from Alisan, but yeah, Gondor just about holding on, but with another push I think Dol Amroth and Umbar could push on to the heart of this boat over here and start rolling Gondor backwards a little bit. You can see there's still quite a lot of reinforcements to go from Dol Amroth and from Umbar. Moving forward now, you can see these Belfast Marines out of ammunition, as are the Belagaya archers, so they will be thrown forwards. More meat for the grinder. But the Belfast Marines do wield axes in melee, so they've got a little bit of extra bite, but it must be said that they're still going to struggle a little bit against the armoured forces of Gondor. Pelagia Marines also shooting them in the sides means they're going to probably be heavily depleted by the time they get there. What's going on over here? Corsair infantry moving forward. Balagar archers moving forward. So more out of ammunition skirmishers, just trying to shore things up as the Ethelon men-at-arms continue to fight to the death, which is better than them just running for the hills, I suppose. It gives the Gondorians a meat shield that they have to carve their way through first. Meanwhile, these ballista bolts whistling overhead. They do get some collateral as those Doranernal archers, but I think they're probably trying to shoot through this blob of fresh soldiers which is arriving onto the front line as King Ammar, Marshal of the Guard, also sending forward some of his out of ammunition Gondor archers to try and hold on to the front. And they are actually, Gondor are pushing them back. They need to be careful of friendly fire though, because as they push them back, of course, yeah, look at that, that's mostly friendly fire, that from Alisan. You did get a few hits as well on the units in behind them, but you do need to be a little bit careful when you do things such as that, lest you break your own units. What's going on here? These Alcarondas legions still on the front line, also the Naru Naaru sentinels. I mean, this is a big committal of quality. Pikes on the front line, solid infantry, and there you can see also the support from afar from that ballista. Means that Alisan's front line force is in a good deal of trouble here. He doesn't have the quality. He needs his Citadel Guard. Does he have his Citadel Guard on the front? He does, but I'm not sure whether it's going to be sufficient with ballista bolts and with more and more reinforcements streaming in. Yes, it's only Belfast Marines, but just keeping the assault going. He needs to be very careful about getting friendly fire here, but that was a very nice shot, threading the needle. More Gondorians falling by the wayside. The veterans of Osgiliath are back here as well, firing away. I think they've caused fear in nearby units, which could be very useful as they go onto the front line. Heavily armoured as well, and there's not a great deal of armour piercing in the battle today. The Citadel Guard are one unit that has it, but they may be the only ones actually. Outside of the javelins, of course, at range. Well, these ballistas, I mean, it is... The ballistas have been getting their fair share of friendly fire. Just the one Pelargir Marine being shot by that ballista bolt there. You can see here they're getting shot in the side here pretty badly by those veterans of Osgiliath. And by the ballista now. So actually, with that support, the Naru Naaru Sentinels and the Alcarondas Legion starting to falter as Alisan moves forward. Once again, I think, breaking... Well, as you know, those are units that were already here, but I do believe there has been a bit of rule breaking going on here by the Gondorians. We shall see if it's enough to secure them victory. It's definitely been enough to give them a bit of a leg up here in the earlier phases of this fight. We shall see if Umbar and Dol Amroth can rally. They need to sort of regroup themselves, I think, because they're just getting broken, to be honest with you. They're just moving forward. The ballista bolts and the archers, however, are proving to be too much for these basic units, and they do end up breaking. Umbar's morale, of course, generally speaking, is understood to be very, very good, but when you're dealing with just Belagai units, that is different. Their morale is much more standard. The same can be true of the Dol Amroth units on display as well. Belfast Marines over here. To be fair, Umbar and Dol Amroth have also managed to get some decent ballista bolts of their own off, just like that one there, scything right through the Gondorian line, so it is definitely a bit of a meat grinder. Javelins coming in, but a bit of a waste of javelins, to be honest with you. They're already broken and fighting to the death. There's no need to utilise javelins on such a target. What have we got over here? Naru Naaru Royal Guard coming forward. This will be the most dominant unit in a skirmish fight on the field today, even more so than the veterans of Osgiliath, I think. The Naru Naaru, the Black Numenorians, the ruling class, they get the finest gear. And that will probably be very apparent. Well, you can see over here actually one of these stray ballista bolts from Umbar, by the looks of things, has destroyed one of Alisan's ballistas, but I would imagine most of the bolts have already been utilised here by the Gondorian player, so I don't think he will be too concerned about that. Javelins raining down from on high, but they're so inaccurate that they're hitting both armies, so it doesn't really matter of the source. Over the other side though, Pelargir Marines shooting into the backs. Yeah, Dol Amroth and Umbar, it's been a tough advance so far, and you definitely say that the Gondorians probably have had the better of this fight so far. More ballista bolts coming now from, this time, Dol Amroth, from Chris Almighty, or just Chris on this occasion. Another unit of Alcarondas Legion moving forward. I mean, this is the thing, how much ammunition does Gondor still have left? They've dumped a lot of it early. Umbar and Dol Amroth may be playing the slightly longer game, but they still have javelins, and those javelins should absolutely be trying to target the Alcarondas Legion, take away some of that Umbar quality. Pelargir Marines getting prodded by the Tirith Air marksman. So if their marksmen continuing to fire in. I think they're going after the veterans of Osgiliath, which to my view is a mistake, to be honest with you, because the veterans of Osgiliath are going to be so good at absorbing that arrow fire. Yes, they're good, but unless you can kill them quickly, I probably wouldn't be going after them, to be honest with you. I'd try and go after the javelins. You're more likely to rack up some good kills. Meanwhile, committing forward the Dol Amroth archers, still units broken and fighting to the death as the Gondorians continue their nasty counter push. Another raking shot, however, from the nearby Umbar ballista. Athlon men-at-arms charging forth. Again, another good shot. I mean, the Gondorians are paying for this advance. They are pushing back, but they are also taking losses as they do so. I'm going to go over here. Tirithea marksmen trying to reposition themselves. The Alcarondas Legion are on the front line, but I think the damage over here has probably been done. And there goes one of the Umbar generals. The Pikes, who he was over here, and you can actually see the Pikes are pulling back, but too late to save the general. Naru and Aru are, of course, locked morale, as the highest tier of Umbar units are. But yeah, even with the new Alcarondas Legion on the front line, I think there's just too many Gondorians from Alisan, and I think, yeah, again, if this is the instance of rule breaking over here from Alisan, it is quite unsporting, I have to say, because he's just continuously moving into this choke point, and this is exactly what I hope this battle wouldn't devolve into. There is a long way in this battle to go, so hopefully it does sort of show its full potential as we go along, but poor form, I think. Poor form. That was my understanding of the rules anyway. Meanwhile, over here, yet more Pelagia Marines are moving forward. Victory seems certain for the Dol Amroth archers, as the Gondorians have taken substantial damage from Eclipse's ballista. The veterans of Osgiliath continuing to fire back. Pelagia Marines cycling around now and going on to the offensive. The Alcarondas Legion are pulling back, and to be honest with you, this front line is a lost cause at this point. They need to regroup. Gondor and Dol Amroth, so used to them being allies, not enemies. Umbar and Dol Amroth, and yeah, as a result, the Alcarondas Legion are now cut off. A good flanking force of the Pelagia Marines again. I'm not entirely sure if they were from like back here and he's committed them illegally according to the rules of the game, but for that one we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Dol Amroth archers continuing to fire, but again, nothing stopping the forward momentum of Gondor over here. But I would say as well that Umbar and Dol Amroth haven't exactly reacted all that well to what Gondor's doing over here. They've certainly rolled over and had their tummy tickled at this point. They need to reorganise themselves and go about this in a different way, because it's not working what they're doing at the moment. And the more they dump into it, the more problems they're going to have. Over here though, they are sort of stabilising. They have done a lot of damage to King Amar's Gondorian units that are here. But ultimately King Amar is still stood in the way of any advance that may be forthcoming. So we shall have to wait and see what happens there. These veterans of Osgiliath, of course, still the most potent unit that he has over here, to be honest with you, and now he can send them into melee. Very strong in melee as well, which, considering the relative quality of the units on display today, Alcarondas Legion do manage to get away, actually, interestingly enough, as the Pelagia Marines let them get away, which is kind of strange. Maybe they were going after the archers, but they ultimately ended up getting neither. Dol Amroth and Umbar having to fall back. I mean, there's nothing to say that Dol Amroth and Umbar necessarily need to be on the offensive constantly. And I would also say that at this stage in proceedings, they can't really afford to be, because there's simply too many Gondorians and there's too much strength and depth at this point from Gondor, that if they go onto the offensive, they are going to lose, I would suggest, fairly handily. Meanwhile, Gondor are losing slowly on this front. A nice volley of javelins coming in there, which will continue to do a good amount of damage. Balagaia Marines, not Balagaia Marines, the Belfalas Marines. Firing nicely into the veterans of Osgiliath, a good target to be going after. Still a few Gondor archers firing away, doing what they can. I think that ballista at this point is out of ammunition. No, it's not actually. It does still have ammo. May as well dump that ammo quickly then before these depleted archers kill the crew. Yes, and you can see over here that's a nice target to be going after, scything through the Citadel Guard, doing some good damage to Alisande's condensed army. Gondor ultimately victorious on this boat over here, but like I said, questionable whether that was allowed by the rules. They do manage to take this Umbar ship. And while continuing to push forward again, more spears and more infantry now on the front line, so some dedicated infantry, which should do a little bit better than out of ammunition archers, and Gondor are starting to run out of steam a little bit on this boat, so a silver lining to all this for Umbar and Dol Amroth, but once again more ballista bolts go whizzing by. Are they going after the Belfast Marines, or are they going after the infantry blob? The infantry blob is probably better because you could break them more easily. Another nice hit there from the ballista though, crushing those veterans of Osgiliath, which will make the advance a little bit easier, you have to say. Dol Amroth waiting there, or biding their time and waiting. Tirithea marksmen back there. These Tirithea marksmen may be out of ammunition. They have pulled out their side swords. They don't stand a chance against Citadel Guard in melee, especially not outnumbered as they are. Tarnostian spears damaged. Looks like the work of a ballista over here on those Marines. But a lot of the Umbar elites have already been committed, which is worrying. Some of them are still alive, but they are heavily depleted at this point. Surely the onus is going to be on Gondor to pick up the slack and be the aggressors from here on out. Thalon men-at-arms moving forward. I mean, it is a victory over here for Umbar and Dol Amroth, but overall, the course of the battle is definitely favouring the Gondorians at this point. Gondor archers wavering. Unsurprising considering the advance coming their way. Can't imagine these 18 brave souls are going to stick around for too much longer. And indeed they're not. They're fighting to the death, but obviously when a unit is fighting to the death, their stats go through the floor. Just taking stock of things back here, just have a little look at what they still have remaining. They still have some good javelins. They still have some ballista. Or a ballista with some ballista bolts. Some dismounted Knights of the Silver Swan, who they really can't afford to stand in front of this ballista for my liking. Otherwise they could end up killing their own units. There's some Black Swan Renegades. That is some AP as well, I should hasten to add. That will be useful later on in the battle, potentially. They and the Citadel Guard being the only two melee armour-piercing units that we're seeing in action today. And now Umbar and Dol Amroth pulling back after their victory here. Oof, very, very narrow miss there from the ballista from across the way from Marshal of the Gar. Pushing forward with some Tarnostian spears and Athalond men-at-arms. Very depleted Tarnostian spears, but they do get into the Pelagia Marines. And that should be sufficient to finish this unit off, to be honest with you. Maybe Alisand is being charitable after rule breaking earlier on, and sacrificing some of his units to the gods to try and even things up just a little bit. He is moving back. I mean, some of these Dol Amroth units are actually in the way of the retreat of the Citadel Guard. Another ballista bolt coming across there. They need to be a little bit careful, Dol Amroth and Umbar. Considering the density of that formation, it's a good target for the ballista. So what will happen now? Marshal of the Guard moving forward. I mean, now the dynamic of the battle changes somewhat, because I'm not sure who's on the attack and the defence. Bit of a mix of the two, to be honest with you. Climbing over this little spit of land as Dol Amroth overwhelming the Pelagia Marines for the most part, and finishing them off. Recapturing their boat over here. Alcarondas Legion moving forward. What Umbar would give to have Alcarondas in this situation. Two of their marksmen over here. Nara and Ira Royal Guard maybe out of ammunition. Looks like they still have their bows actually. They need to be careful about getting in range of the ballista, because that will kill them, whereas anything else at range will really struggle because of just how exceptionally tough they are to break down, especially without AP. Marksman of Caer Andros moving in, of course. They technically count as a two-hander in melee. Pulling out a two-handed sword, the closest thing to a heavy swordsman on the field today. This may be a little bit foolhardy actually from Eclipse. He's moving into King Amar's position. Marksman, a large amount of Gondor spearmen cresting. I was going to say cresting the hill there, but that's not it. Cresting the stern of this boat. Marksman of Caer Andros pulling back. after being engaged in melee, as Umbar once again sally forwards to engage the Gondorian lines. Narin Royal Guard defeat is almost a certainty. They need more on the front line, I do agree. There are some Alcarondas Legion on the way, and with that, to be fair, as well as those depleted sentinels, this Gondorian pocket of resistance should be overrun. 81 Gondor Spearmen, is that going to be enough to reverse their fortunes? Probably not. Belfast Marines moving forward, getting shot up by the marksman of Caer Andros. Still a lot of Gondorians on this ship over here. Tarnostian Spearmen are going to be entrusted with holding the line, but there are only 52 of them, and they're not really as good as the equivalent Gondorian Spearmen. Easily pushed out the way, potentially. Some Adonai Shield Guard over there as well. Or Adonai? Not sure how to pronounce that. I called it Adunaim before, but it might be Adonai or it might be Adonaium. Adonaium sounds perhaps more correct considering their the other pronunciations of their units, so that's what I will call them from now on, or at least endeavour to. Defeat still seems certain, actually. The Narin Aru not enough to turn this fight around. I mean, some of these Gondorians are shaken, to be fair. The depleted, tired ones are already shaken. They're doing a good job here at holding on to the front line. The men of Gondor showing their grit and determination on this occasion. Of course, in the last battle we saw sent by Lango, the Gondorians struggled going through the outer Haradrim defence, and then they didn't have enough left to deal with the quality of Umbar, but this time it's just a straight up fight between the two. I suppose if Dol Amroth has already been conquered, this would be sort of a battle for the mouth of the Anduin. And so far, Gondor look to be doing a good job. Ballista crew still getting into position there. Looks like there's noises of battle back here, which is somewhat puzzling. But obviously this... Oh, that's why. It's because these spears over here are technically in the same unit as the ones over there. And there is actually still a guy over here. He's broken and fighting to the death. But he's still over here from the initial flanking force from Umbar and Dol Amroth. What a hero. And he is actually landing some hits amazingly, which for a unit that's broken and fighting to the death is really rather surprising indeed, but interesting to see where this goes. Obviously it's a bit of a wet noodle contest between two spear units, but you would give the edge to the Gondor spearmen in this sort of situation. It is more their deal than Umbar's. Regardless, his fate is already sealed. He will die, if not to that spearman. Then, oh yeah, he did. He died to that spear. Maybe he should have jumped into the water. Get some of that Rome barbarian invasion scripting working so that units can swim. Although if memory serves correctly, units could get so tired when they were doing that they would often drown when you tried. In come the Knights of the Silver Swan. Dismounted Knights of the Silver Swan pushing forward. Again, there's still quite a lot of Citadel Guard on the front line. They're going to need support from some sort of ranged unit, I would imagine. More Athalon men-at-arms moving forward, which gives them more kindling for the fire, so to speak, but it's still going to be tough for them, I think. This is where Gondor are at home, after all, especially the Citadel Guard, where there's a lot of armoured units in front of them that they can do damage to, but also having the holding power of spears is definitely a good thing. Hopefully this battle does evolve beyond just these two boats, however, because I think that would be the idea. But considering that both teams at this point are just constantly funneling men into the choke points, I feel as though I may be hoping for more than I'm going to get in that regard. I wish players sometimes would just realise that the rules are there for a reason. They're not there specifically to screw you over. They're there because it's how the battle is supposed to go, but the tone was set by Alisan earlier, so now everyone is just piling in on these choke points, which is a shame, I think. Gondor trying to shoot into the side there, but interestingly enough, actually, this the architecture of this ship over here, this is a solid entity, so you're not going to be able to shoot into the side of that force over there. In fact, you're more likely to get friendly fire on Marshal of the Guards infantry as he continues to try and hold the line against this assault. Part of the rules may also necessitate the fact that Gondor have to be on the defence, which, considering how this battle has gone, I think it would have been better if the scenario pivoted partway through so that Gondor had to be more aggressive, because they already built up a bit of an advantage, to be honest with you. Interesting that Marshal of the Guard is always on the defence in his scenarios, where it's applicable. I'm not insinuating anything there, but it is often scenario makers' preferences to be the most elite army on the defence, because it is often the most satisfying role to play. Which obviously, when you make the scenario, it's your right to pick the most fun of the armies that there is available, because you put the hard yards in to actually make the thing. Belfalas Marines, meanwhile, now getting into position, so these javelins should be pretty good at thinning the Gondorian herd, and actually, with the Adoniam spearmen coming in here, quite a lot of quality, a lot of range support coming in. This is where the blob might not actually favour Alistan, and it might actually come back to haunt him. We shall see. Meanwhile, this Gondorian line has done very well, actually, to deal with the Inaru Naaru and their supporting Balagaya. Numbers were on their side, and that is what has ultimately ended up winning them this fight. There'll be promotions waiting for all of these men should they succeed in this. Oof, that is nasty, however. King Ammar getting a really good shot. He's repositioned his ballista, firing through here, and this could be a crippling blow to Dol Amroth if they aren't able to make this stick. And you can see that they're trying to get into a position where the ballista will be less of a problem. Cox and the Andros back there. I mean, the javelins from Dol Amroth here, the Belfalas Marines, are doing a pretty good job as well of getting some nice volleys off, thinning out the Gondor ranks, which has brought things back into balance just a little bit more. As the battle continues, what's going on over here? Marksman Andros, victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle, as they pull out their longswords. More Dol Amroth men have arrived, a little bit too late though. They needed to arrive sooner if they were to back up this assault. The Thalon men at arms joining the fray on the front line, but they are outmatched at this point. Things were going pretty well over on this side of things earlier. You can see the Tirithea marksmen, they're putting more of their hopes into that fight over there at this point. Arrows, javelins, and more of their infantry muscle being committed over to that side, whereas this side is more of a sort of sacrificial lamb, to be honest with you. But they are still going to fight. I mean, the Athlon men at arms are decent at holding a line, but this sort of battle is much more Gondor style than their former vassal. There is a ballista over here. I'm pretty sure it'd be out of ammunition at this stage, however. Marshal of the Guards ballista over here. Still some Gondorians further back. You can see that both sides at this point don't have too much in the way of reinforcements. Umbar and Dol Amroth especially looking a bit thin on the ground, but to be fair, they are finally making some progress over here, with the Adoniam Lancers here in the mix. The Dismounted Knights, the Silver Swan, keeping the morale in check, so even if a stray ballista bolt does connect, it's not likely to result in a crippling, cascading failure of morale. Marksman of Andros going to be caught out here by the advancing men of Umbar and Dol Amroth. Again, more ballista bolts coming in though. An easier shot now, it must be said, because there's less clutter in the way, so it will be interesting to see how this goes, because they could get shot directly in the back, potentially. Well, actually, over here is a much safer area. They need to get onto this connecting bridge as quickly as possible, so that this stern section of this boat gets in the way of this ballista from doing more damage. That was, again, a crippling shot. He needs to get moving here. Dol Amroth and Umbar need to hot-foot it over to this boat. Even if the melee engagement is questionable at best, it's better than just sitting there and getting shot up by Marshal of the Guard's ballista. Or it might even be King Ammar's ballista. I mean, King Ammar's ballista, he could move his ballista up over to this area to shoot into the back of them. But Medieval 2 Siege, it'd be interesting to see if he can actually get into that position. I'm sure he will try, because it's definitely where you want to be. And actually now at this point, more and more men of Dol Amroth arriving onto the front line, leaving this fight in question, even with the abilities of the Marksman of Andros in an up-close and personal fight. This fight becoming a little bit more questionable at this point. There's more Tirithea marksmen push in. Gondorian horns blaring out across the map. are pushing up. Adonai Shield Guard are pulling back, which is an interesting choice. They want to save another one of their elite units for later, which, considering the situation, I'm actually more sympathetic to that in a match like this, where siege equipment and archers and javelins are all over the place, and positioning of them could be the difference between victory and defeat. Having said that, the Adonai Shield Guard on the front line over here could have made a big difference. Gondor infantry are fighting. I mean, I would hope that the dismounted knights of the Silver Swan are still here, and they are, because otherwise the morale of these men of Dol Amroth would be compromised, to be honest with you, when facing off against the Gondorian wall of men such as this. Ooh, that was very, very fortunate, but I doubt all of those bolts are going to be so kind. But ammunition at this stage of the game is probably going to start to be a little bit more scarce. Interesting to see if that is indeed the case. I think this is the first, actually, of Marshal of the Guards scenarios as well, where we haven't seen Numenor. The Numenorians are still here, of course, in varying quantities throughout all three of these factions. Tirithea marksmen continuing to fire the flaming arrows into the side of those Gondorians. I doubt you're going to rout the Gondorians at this point, though. You're more likely to rout your own men, actually. Knights of the Silver Swan will keep the morale ticking over nicely, but yeah, over here, with more reinforcements arriving on the front line, the committal of the Naruna Royal Guard to melee earlier on was a bit of a mistake, I think, from Eclipse, because now there are only 5 of them, and they still had ammunition as well. I can understand the thinking behind it, but it just didn't work out as well as he was hoping, I'm sure. But in the end, at the very least, Dol Amroth have managed to break down another Gondorian defence. I don't know how many more of these assaults the forces of Dol Amroth and Umbar actually have left in them. But then again, you can also say the same about Gondor. I mean, how many more defences do they have left in them, especially considering I think Dol Amroth have probably paced their ammunition usage a little bit better. Warns of the White Tower here, Pelagia Marines, still another unit of them, so they still have another fresh unit of javelins at the very least. There is actually another unit of javs over here, 2 units of javelins in fact, as well as some more archers, but they can't really shoot so easily into the front, but yeah, they're broken. Dismounted Knights of Silver Swan, again, I think it's just a matter of, while there may have been some rule breaking going on from Gondor in this fight particularly, I do think the way that Dol Amroth and Umbar have attacked has been a little bit slapdash, if I'm being honest. Like, they've committed simultaneously too much to the point where now that they've lost it's probably crippled them, but not enough to the point where when they attacked they were ever going to make something substantial happen. It was in that dreaded middle ground. If you do less or more, there's a purpose behind it. If you do less, it's like you're just playing the long game. If you do more, you're playing the short game. In between, you're playing into the hands of the defender. And I think ultimately there's been a little bit too much of that from Umbar and Dol Amroth on this occasion, and it's why I think Gondor will carry the day on this occasion. The Dol Amroth ballista crew picking up the slack in front. I mean, to be fair as well, Umbar and Dol Amroth have had to be the attackers in this situation, so they've had to be the ones to open themselves up to situations like this, where they're now getting shot in the back by Gondor archers, which is clearly going to do a lot of damage to them. They still should have Black Swans somewhere. Here come the Dismounted Knights of Silver Swan, and yes, they do. They're just going to end up getting shot by those archers, though, surely. And look here, the blood spray going up. A few of these units getting roasted by the flaming arrows. In come the Dismounted Knights. Here, Black Swan Renegades, yeah, so I mean a decent amount of quality coming onto this front line. Again, they may push through here, but I think they're going to run out of steam by the time this battle grinds to a halt, unfortunately, for the host led up by presumably Castamere. I like the fact that Gondor are going onto the offensive here, though. I think it is only fair at this point. They've engineered a good situation for themselves. Now I think they should be the ones to move forward as the Athlon Men-at-Arms try to stop the advance of the armoured up Gondorians, which they should be able to do at least on a temporary basis. I'm not sure about their abilities to do this long term. Just behind spearmen moving forward. Shield wall push might not even be the worst idea at this point. I mean, there's a few Belfast Marines back here, but that's all there is reinforcement-wise, as well as the Tirithea marksmen. It's over here, really, that there is still some Adonai Shield Guard, or Adonai Shield Guard. Still some Belfast Marines way back there from Mr. Sneakman as well, but other than that, there is, I believe, nothing. There's artillery piece from Chris as well. Maybe not all is lost, but it's hard to see how they can keep this assault going all the way over to this boat over here. Even if they win these two fights, they're going to be so on their last legs that some Citadel Guard and some Wardens of the White Tower are all that's going to be required to win the fight for them. Black Swans are on the front line, but as soon as they arrived, they're starting to get focused down by arrow fire from across the way. Which is a shame for Dol Amroth, because this was probably their best tool for being aggressive with because of those maces. AP is always going to be good against Gondor, but they're not going to be able to lay it down for a long enough period of time for it to be truly worthwhile, which is unfortunate for them. Pelargir Marines continuing to throw javelins in. They're going for the Adonai Shield Guard as well, which is definitely the right target to be going after. Several of those high tier spears falling, and with it more chances of the invader from the south subjugating yet more vassals. Meanwhile, dismounted Knights of Silver Swan fighting on the front line. There may only be 18 of them left, but as far as quality goes, still probably a necessary addition to this front line at this point. There are a few javelins finding their marks, killing off a few of the Gondorians that are involved in this counter-attack. A player has admitted defeat. It's not Chris. It is Eclipse 2500 off the Dark Cloud by the looks of things, but he also had very little left. He only had his Adonai Shield Guard is still fighting on the front line, which of course under normal circumstances have locked morale, but there aren't very many of them left, to be honest with you, nor are there very many of the Naranaru Royal Guard. I gotta be honest, I would feel a little bit aggrieved if I were Umbar and Dol Amroth in this fight, because I feel like they were set up to be knocked down in many ways. Maybe if the rules regarding committal of resources to individual ships had been followed more closely, it would have been closer. I still think they were up against it, really. I think Gondor were probably the ones going into this match that had the natural advantages, both in terms of the way the battle was structured and the type of battle that it is, considering what Gondor are good at. But I think it probably would have been a little bit of a better spectacle if everyone had stuck to how the battle was meant to be played. But even with that, it's still been an interesting one, just because you don't really see a battle like this. I mean, it's a bizarre looking thing. If you didn't know what it was, it would look very, very strange. But considering we do know what it is, it makes an awful lot of sense. There are Wardens of the White Tower pushing forward now, so I would imagine this is where Gondor go on to the full offensive and try and wipe their former vassals from the face of the map. More arrows being shot in from behind. A bit of friendly fire going on as well, though. Obviously, standard Gondor archers, pretty much the quintessential average archer, so with average accuracy, obviously, they're spraying their arrows all over the place a little bit, and that is hitting some of the Gondorians from the front, but Gondor won't mind that too much. One of the better factions in the game for absorbing such damage. Pelargir Marines, Belfast Marines, I should say, getting up into position to try and rain some javelins down on this Gondorian offensive. More javelins coming in from the Marines. I think that was, yeah, it was the ones that Mr. Sneakman had held back up until this point, I think. These javelins could be a bit of a difference maker. I mean, they are doing actually quite a lot of damage to the Gondorians. If they had arrived sooner, that could have been a real difference maker, actually. Because the Gondor archers wouldn't have been able to shoot at all things, and if they did target down the Marines, they at least wouldn't have shredded up Dol Amroth and Umbar's infantry to the same extent that they have ultimately ended up doing. A bolt whizzing past as well from Chris's artillery piece. Some Belfast Marines way back over there as well, so there is still some units on their way forward. More javelins. Javelins over here as well, trying to just dump their entire ammo supply in there if they can. I think this unit is out of ammunition though, so they're just going to be committed to melee. Again, the axes, a little bit more damage, but isn't going to be enough on this occasion. Again, javelin rain coming down. You can see how quickly actually the Gondorians are taking losses. Warns of the White Tower moving forward. I mean, that's inadvisable, to be honest with you, with all these javelins coming forth. Still units back there, of course. I mean, this at the very least will bring the percentages closer into balance. The spike of power that all of these Belfast Marines do offer the Dol Amroth players at this stage in proceedings. Gondor have actually broken and fighting to the death at this point. It would be very impressive, to be honest with you, if Dol Amroth were able to fight their way back into a winning position in this battle, considering the type of battle that it is. But perhaps, as I said earlier, I do think that they have marshalled their ammunition a little bit better, the red team on this occasion. If that's enough to get them back into the game, then it proved to be a very worthwhile thing indeed. I'm not sure though. It's going to be tough. There's still units over here, a lot of Pelagia Marines. Marksman Andros still shooting. Gondor archers being committed to the front line. I mean, they should still lose this fight, to be honest with you, but at the very least it'll be a very Pyrrhic victory for Dol Amroth, if at all, with another unit, and Gondor still have some units over here. Still some Gondorians fighting on the front line. The Warns of the White Tower were pulled back, but yeah, veterans of Osgiliath fighting on the front, backed up by some very depleted Pelagia Marines. That, of course, is not going to be enough to hold on to this front line. You can still the Gondor archers and Marksman Andros shooting into the sides now of the newly arrived Belfalas Marines as they try and add their, I was going to say sword arms, but axe arms to the front line fight. And obviously they have, very similar to the Pelagia Marines, they're pretty much the same unit, so their armour is maybe not as good as a lot of the other Dol Amroth units that were on display today. What a bloody fight indeed. And I think that's it. There is a ballista crew still there. If they've run out of ammunition, they may as well scurry forwards and try and make something happen. There is the other unit of Belfalas Marines. Perhaps the last one. As Mr. Sneakman commits yet another unit to the front line as they surge in and overwhelm this Gondorian position. But yeah, there's no way that Belfalas Marines on the front line are going to be sufficient to break down this area. They do have some Fountain Guard as well, actually. Again, like I said, it's set up to be knocked down a little bit, I think. Umbar and Dol Amroth. A lot of these javelins are... well, some of them are making their way through. Actually, all of them are, so I mean, they're going to get some kills here on the Marksman Andros, if nothing else. This front line fight over here will start to go the way of Gondor, though, as more and more of these Gondorians push into this front line. Still the Tirithea marksmen, who are actually holding their one-handed sword in the way that someone normally holds a two-handed one there, but don't be fooled. They're not quite up to the same level as the Marksman Andros are in melee. Interesting actually to see this. Yeah, I mean, it is within 10%. I'm not sure whether Dol Amroth will be able to kill 6% more of the Gondorians by the time the battle is done. They will need to rely heftily on the one unit of javelins that still have ammunition left, I think. Or do they have any javelins that have ammunition left? Or are all of these... not so sure. I mean, the Belfast Marines are charging in. They have at least made it to the point where they are attacking the boat that is effectively the flagship of Gondor. So they did make it to the point where they were attacking them. And the battle has ultimately been a dynamic one. There has been fighting all across the map, so it didn't turn into just 2 choke points, which is good. Definitely a good thing. Dor and Ernal archers are still here as well, just throwing anything into the front line. They're going to go down swinging, Dol Amroth, but go down they will, considering the quality of the Gondorians that are still left before them. Yeah, these Belfast Marines do still have a bit of ammunition, but they do need to throw their javelins pretty quickly in order to gain some good kills, because they are getting focused down by the archers across the way. King Amar there, doing his thing. And there is another pretty meaty volley there. This might be enough to ensure that it does end within that magical 10%. As the Gondorians continue to take losses. Marshal of the Guard... actually, no, that's King Amar's ballista, interestingly enough. I mean, this is pretty brutal. Brutal volleys. It's not going to be enough for Dol Amroth to go on to win the fight, but... the Gondor archers aren't going to be able to kill them off quickly enough to stop this damage from being delivered to their lines. Obviously in melee though, it's not as if this was the demons of the desert, it might be enough to turn the battle around, but not every javelin unit is capable of such grisly acts of destruction. Dol Amroth continuing to fight hard on the front line. Again, these Belfast Marines over here are now out of ammunition. Pretty much the premier unit for Dol Amroth at this point in time. But quality-wise, Pelagia Marines now revealing themselves as well. So Gondor still have some javelins, which they're going to use over on this side of things. Still got some ammunition over here, to be fair. They are starting to take more and more losses now. And in fact, I think they just ran out of ammunition, interestingly enough. So they are going to charge into melee. But they did some damage, and you can't ask for more than that. Ooh, they've got to kill 3% in melee. I'm not sure they're going to be up to that challenge, to be honest with you. We'll go up to ×2 speed, I think, for here. The Belfast Marines do have those axes, gives them a little bit more bite in melee, but they're up against the kind of units where I don't think that's going to be sufficient for them to kill off a whole bunch more units. With the Dismounted Knights of Silver Swan here on the front line with them, though, which I think there are some, or are those just officers? No, there are 8 of them there, so that morale buff is still in effect, so they will at least stand and fight a little bit longer. In come the Fountain Guard, which obviously, again, that's the final nail in the coffin really, as Gondor now surge forward with everything. They're going into all-out offence now, attacking the 2 Dol Amroth positions, trying to wipe them off the face of the map, and they will succeed in that, but it will be a costly one. And another high-quality battle, you have to say. Long may Spirit of Thunder make these, to be honest with you, because they're always a really interesting thing to behold. Victory will be ours, eh? Gondor Archer's balance of forces is evenly matched. Another percent falls, so maybe they can do it. It's over here where I'm more concerned for Dol Amroth, to be honest with you, as the Belfast Marines. I mean, Citadel Guard are there, Fountain Guard are there. How many kills are Belfast Marines really likely to get on units of that calibre? Not many is what I'm assuming. But this is probably the first naval battle, or fully naval battle, even if it has been done in a rather roundabout way, that I've shown on my channel, outside of the Shogun 2 campaign as the Mori, which is pretty cool. Victory will be ours. Defeat seems certain. Only a military genius could win this battle. Yes. Even a Witcher volley into this blob over here I think wouldn't be sufficient for Dol Amroth at this point, because they would still have to deal with the Gondorians that are over on this side of things as well. Albeit Dol Amroth are putting up a little bit more of a fight over on this side of things. Gondor don't have quite the same level of punch with their infantry over here. Ooh, that's unfortunate. Marshal of the Guards General does fall, so these Belfast Marines do manage one last spit in the eye of the Gondorians here, as one of the captains of Gondor falls when victory is upon them, which is unfortunate for him. But he has at least led his navy here to a victory over the southern invader. Defeat seems certain. Getting up close and personal here with the Gondorians. Belfast Marines trying their best, but their best is not going to be enough here. The Belfast Marines have also got almost a little bit of a Roman look about them. Like with these, I'm not sure what these things are called actually, but there is a little bit of that about them, to be honest. Which is, it works definitely for these sorts of situations. These Belfast Marines are now broken and fighting to the death, so the Gondorians victorious over on this side of things. And it has been a long and bloody road. But they have ultimately been successful. There goes one of the Imrahils. Ooh, are they going to make it just 1 more percent? I don't know if they are. They're definitely on their last legs at this point. They might make it, but I don't know. Can they do it? Can it be possible? Hang on a minute, what is this down here? What have they got way back over here? It is Chris's ballista crew. They are still here. They didn't join the front line. They didn't quite feel it, I guess. 6 dismounted knights to Silver Swan. Is there anything a little bit further back that can be used to try and make up that extra 1%? Doesn't look like it. So we might have a just beyond 10% differential on this occasion, because I can't see them getting too many more kills on the Gondorian host. But that's not the end of the world, you have to say. It's been a valiant effort, but ultimately it's always going to be quite difficult for them, you have to say. That's going to be the end of them. So are they going to go after the ballista crew? I'm not sure they'd make it in the frames that remain. It is a reasonably close battle though, even still. And Dol Amroth gave it the old college try, but they just didn't have enough in the late game. Onto the White Tower. They will scurry off down there, and I guess they will go after the ballista crew, which is just waiting at the back. I think Imrahil himself is still over here, actually. Or one of the two. Is he in there? Yeah, there he is, look. Getting passed around by all of these Pelagia Marines. If he can land a few blows, then maybe he can make up the difference. Somehow I doubt it. Did he just die? Nope, there he is. He keeps getting knocked over. None of these units particularly high damage in melee, but they do finally bring him down. And that is probably going to be that. I think that's it. Victory for them.
Victory is ours.
And there we go.
Let it be a salve upon our wounds.
Close but no cigar for the 10% difference, but a well-fought battle, and Gondor ultimately re-established their dominance at sea around the Bay of Belfalas. Umbar's invasion stopped, Dol Amroth may be freed from the Black Númenórean grip. But yeah, like I said, I think depending on how well or poorly the rules were followed in this battle, it could have made a very big difference, and I think that Umbar and Dol Amroth definitely drew the short straw in that regard. It's obviously very tempting to continuously funnel men into a choke point in the way that some of the Gondorians did on this occasion, but if the game is intended for you not to be able to do that, it can have a detrimental impact, which is a bit of a shame, but ultimately it didn't have too much of a negative effect on the overall enjoyability of the battle, I don't think. Let's see what did the damage for the Gondorian players. I think this was, yes, this was Marshal of the Guard, so this was Spirit of Thunder himself. His army, of course, had the Warns of the White Tower, albeit they didn't do all that much, to be honest with you. His ballista did very well. Pelagia Marines, and I would say that the javelins on both sides of the conflict today were probably the ones that were the most significant unit, because it was the primary source of AP, good amounts of damage as well. Can't ask for more than that. And yeah, a few units breaking 100 as well. Marksman of Caer Andros, mostly ranged units getting some good kills. Ballista from Captain Beregond, which I'm not sure which of the two this is. Could have been either Alisan or King Ammar, to be honest with you. But yeah, the ballistas were another unit on this battle, which were very, very effective. 405 kills for that. Several getting over 100, including the javelins and a lot of archers. And then finally, another 156 kills on this ballista over here. And once again, the units breaking 100 were almost exclusively ranged units because of the nature of the fight. And also the nature of most of the infantry today, which was, for the most part, just the workhorses of both armies, like Balagaya, Athalond units, and standard Gondor infantry and spears. But yeah, big thank you to Spirit of Thunder for sending this one to me once again. Long may this sort of thing continue, because these are always very, very good. And this one in particular was obviously something almost entirely brand new, considering the considering how you have to do naval battles in a Reforged scenario. It's nice to see this sort of thing. As for what's next, I think this one should be coming out on the Monday, so the next thing to be seen is probably the possible finale of the ill-fated Lothlorien Divide and Conquer campaign, where if at all possible, I will try and throw off the final dregs of Mordor's invasion, but it might be one step too far. I've managed to fight off most of it, but I just don't think I have the manpower left unless I can somehow get Celeborn into reinforcement range without him immediately being focused down by the besieging armies that are attacking Caras Galadon. We shall see. Hopefully I can salvage the Lorien campaign, because it was just getting to the point where it could have gotten really quite entertaining with some of the Galathrim units so close but yet so far. We'll have to wait and see on that one. Don't need to rant and rave about that here. As for the next Reforged replay, I think the next one will be a battle on the Iron Hills, which will probably follow on Friday after the stream on Wednesday, and then there will probably be a subsequent stream as well on the Saturday. At least that's the plan. The stream on Saturday and the video on Friday could turn around, or could change to be the other way around. So the stream is on Friday and the video is on Saturday. I haven't quite made up my mind on that yet. It really just depends on what happens closer to the time, to be honest with you, when the best time for streaming would be. So that's the plan moving forward. Big thank you to Marshal of the Gar / Spirit of Thunder once again for his work in building this scenario. Big thank you to all of the players for being part of a good quality game. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me, whatever is next.